and gentlemen, I give to you Mr. Edwin Black.
Hello, everybody. You can all hear with this? Okay, so a real pleasure to come back to Broward. And I'm most attracted and pleased about my appearance here today because the topic or the nexus point for our discussion is going to be critical thinking. And it actually coincides a great deal with some discussions we had over pizza. Actually, you ate the pizza, I just had a little sliver of it. But it's really about critical thinking, just as Joshua Kimber says. And before we go on, I parked in a parking place right outside the building. It said Joshua Kimber, Professor of the Year. Is that true? Yeah. All right, let's very and a very enlightened man. You should feel very, very comfortable and honored to be in his teaching sphere. So we're going to be talking about critical thinking. And it's not just any old type of critical thinking. I'm going to be asking you to engage in critical thinking in some of the greatest issues of our day, the issues that you are seeing on television, in the headlines. And even if you're not looking at the headlines or television and seeing this news, one day this news will come to you, so you may as well learn about it now. I'm talking about the Mideast, I'm talking about the Israel-Palestine crisis, and many others. I'll make my presentation, I'll show you some stuff, then I'll take any questions you have on this topic to the limit that our time has. Joshua knows when to yank me out of here. And I know that while you guys were munching on your pizza, you came up with extra questions, and I'll be happy to take any of those as well. And then then I'll sign any books that anybody wants to pick up from my selection of books there. Then I've got to run over and do a session on international law for the Nova Law School, which I understand if I'm a crow will take 30 seconds to get there, and if I'm driving a car it might take 10 minutes. I'm actually on a 30-event tour, crisscrossing the United States, sometimes doing as many as 4 and 5 events a day. And because I found myself down here, I did not want to miss the opportunity to address Joshua's class. And I hope to come back one day soon and do more of this. So, by the time you guys get out of here, you're either going to have the curse or the blessing of great knowledge, okay? You're going to have not only knowledge, you're going to understand the one doorway that all knowledge must pass through, which is what Joshua calls critical thinking. Or, as I tell my journalism classes when I speak to them, if your grandmother says she loves you, check it out. And since you're living in the age of misinformation, when it's so easy for anyone to have a WordPress, anyone to have a Twitter account, anyone to have a Facebook, and information now speaks to itself. Information doesn't even go in the free flow of ideas, and you get to stand there and see all the clouds go by and pick and choose. You only see one cloud, or one cloud from 5 different directions. And so you're now going to learn stuff that is going to make you more intellectually powerful than anyone else on this campus, anyone at the local newspaper. What's it called? The Sun Sentinel? It's still in business? Okay. The Sun Sentinel, the Miami Herald, any of these guys. And then you're going to be able to read a headline and think thrice. So, I'm going to tell you what I did. I'm going to give you some examples of knowledge, how to check the knowledge, and then I'll take the questions. Now, when I went to Israel about a year and a half ago to do the investigation financing the flames, which just came out about a year ago, it actually premiered, it launched live on C-SPAN in the House of Representatives. So when I did that, my goal was, since I've written 11 books on the Middle East or issues involving the Middle East or Holocaust or Jews or oil or the Ottoman Empire, my mission was to get underneath what we hear about and look at the one thing that powers all information: money. No information is empowered without money. You may think your Twitter account is free. There's $1 billion infrastructure behind your Twitter account that enables you to click a button and 20 seconds later it is seen everywhere from Istanbul to Indiana. That is not free. That takes money. Additionally, hate cannot exist and thrive without money, because hate requires two things. It requires, first of all, it requires fear and ignorance. But after you get fear and ignorance to mix together to make this hate thing, then you've got to be able to dehumanize your adversary. You can't hate what you can't dehumanize. And then, of course, you've got to proliferate your ideas onto the next guy. And that takes infrastructure, that takes money, that takes everything that I've been talking about. So I went into Israel, and I was supposed to meet some people at a junction, and a guy was stabbed there, stabbed in the heart. He was a medical clown. Palestinian stabbed him, Palestinian terrorist. And we've been seeing and hearing about these Palestinian terrorists quite a bit. They've been mowing down babies in their cars on train platforms, breaking into homes and slicing the throats of the kids, blowing up buses, etc., etc. And I found out that as soon as a Palestinian commits an act of terrorism against an innocent civilian, he goes on immediate salary, an official salary. And this salary could be a couple $100s a month if it's an unsuccessful plot to blow a bus, or if he kills 30 people, could be getting a couple $1,000s a month. And this money is paid directly to the terrorist while he's in prison. He gets what they call a POA. Everybody here know what a POA is? Power of attorney. Everybody know that word? Power of attorney. You know what that means? You can sign a little piece of paper and you can say, you make all my decisions for me in this regard. So people do that for many reasons. It's called a power of attorney, and so he signs a power of attorney, and the power of attorney is empowered to take the money and or direct the money, and that money then goes to the terrorist girlfriend, to the terrorist terrorist cell, to his mother, to his wife, to his football team, wherever he wants it to go. This money works on this level of compensation works on a graduated scale. The more people you kill, the higher is your monthly compensation. And it's all laid out pursuant to the law of the prisoner. It's not secret money. In fact, let's see if I can get a copy of it right here. There's the graduated scale. It's in Arabic, but the numbers are in English. You can see if you go to jail for 5 years, you get a couple $100s a month. If you go to jail for 30 years, you get a couple $1,000s a month. These are the best salaries in the Palestinian Authority. They're like 10 times what you could get if you were earning a living. And this scale is put out by the Palestinian Authority. Everybody here know what the Palestinian Authority is? It's the Palestinian government in waiting. It's called the law of the prisoner, and it's no secret. It is no secret. There's an NGO called the Prisoners Club, determined to make sure that every time the PA has a shortfall, that when they pick up an extra $1 million or $2 million to get through their budget freeze, that money goes first and foremost to pay these terrorist salaries, and after those are paid, then they go into health, and they go into welfare, into building and education and everything else. So the number one mission of Palestinian money is terrorism. How much am I talking about? $3 to $7 million a month. How much am I talking about? I'm talking about 8% of the Palestinian budget. And if you add in the other programs, like special tuition for the relatives of the bomber, wedding benefits, it comes out to 16% of the Palestinian budget. 16%. You know where that money's coming from? Take a guess.
My pocket.
Your pocket, correct. How about your pocket? How about your pocket? That's right, you are paying this money. While Joshua Kimber is scratching around to figure out if he can get an extra $5 for lunch, $500 million of U.S. taxpayer money is being sent over to the Palestinian Authority. And it's being sent over for one reason only. Peace and reconciliation. He's trying to buy peace and buy reconciliation with this money. What is the money doing? They're paying for the exact opposite. And it's not just the United States government. It's the European donors. It's billions of dollars going into this tiny stretch of land. Tiny stretch of land that you could drive across faster than you can get from here to Orlando. Drive across the whole country faster than you can get from here to Orlando. It's more money than we spent after World War II to rebuild all of Europe. Who knew about this thing I'm talking about? Which is shouted from the rooftops in the Palestinian Authority, that everybody knew about in Palestine, that's been on the TV, where they're proud of it, they get bonuses, they argue about whether the guy gave the money to his girlfriend or his wife. The entire Palestinian society knew about this program. The entire Israeli society and government knew about this program. The State Department, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, all knew about this program. The British Foreign Office knew about this program. All the foreign ministries, foreign offices of Europe all knew about this program. And the newspaper people, the media, all knew about this program. It was public. Everybody in the Western media all knew about this program. The only one who didn't know was your legislators and you. And that's why I went around talking to 4 parliaments in 4 weeks, and I went in many countries over a 7-month period discussing this and many other issues of what are we doing with our money. This situation is so obvious that one guy admitted that he hatched a terrorist plot for the sole purpose of getting $70,000 for his daughter's wedding. So this is not supporting a terrorist organization like Hamas or Al-Shabaab or ISIS. This is actually creating terrorists where they didn't exist from regular, ordinary people, rewarding them for specific acts of terrorism and increasing those rewards by the level of devastation. If you think this just attacks Israel and Jewish people, I was last week in North Carolina, in Greensboro. Man came in, small town in North Carolina, Christian man. His daughter was visiting Israel, and was having lunch in a university just like this, up on Mount Scopus, when they threw a bomb, and there was nothing left of his daughter but little dental remains. When they blow up a bomb, when they blow up a bus, they don't do a visa check to see if it's Polish nuns, if it's Christian people from Tennessee, if it's Jews from Brooklyn, British people, Greeks, they just blow the bus up. Okay. So that's one way we discover that American taxpayer money is doing the opposite of what we had hoped it would do, and been doing it for some time. And of course, the reason the media didn't want to run this is because then, after they run this, your next question is, why are you running this now? What were you doing the last 5 years when this was going on? This is such an open thing. This is like running a course in this college on meteorology and omitting the part where periodically there are tornadoes. Okay. Then I went into a small town called Nabi Sela. I heard that there were riots, scheduled riots, every Friday at 1 o'clock, a scheduled riot in a little town called Nabi Sela. It's Mr. Parker, right, Professor Parker? Can we go to Jerusalem? Right here? All right, come down a little bit, go up to you, okay? And Seretz, pull out. Okay, hold on. Where is Hebron? South. Right. So it's somewhere around here. It's Google. Who knows? We need critical thinking. Anyway, this town is inhabited by 550 people. And they're all part of one family, the Tamimi family. And this town has got about 2 and maybe 3 streets in it, depending upon how you evaluate the, hold it right there. Don't move, I want to show something to people. How you evaluate whether it's one road or not. I'm going to interrupt myself because he made a small mistake here that's a big win. Here's the refugee camp. Why is there a refugee camp from 1948? When there's billions of dollars going into the refugee program, and they say there's 5 million refugees from 1948. There's 248,000 refugees left. 880,000 Jews were kicked out of the Arab countries and flown to Israel, expelled with nothing on their back. Even the rings were pulled out of their ears. They were in a refugee camp for about a week. Do I look like a refugee to you? My parents came here from the Holocaust. They had nothing. My parents were refugees. They came from a refugee camp. But according to the rules that have been made, if you're descendants from a refugee of this conflict, it's eternal refugee status. Eternal. And so, there's more money to be made keeping these people in a beat-up refugee camp for 3 generations than moving them a few miles that way so they can live like regular citizens. This is all part of the critical thinking. Okay, so I go into this town called Nabi Sela. They have a scheduled riot. And I'm ready to go, okay? I go into town, I sit with the Arab protesters in their house. I say, what's going to happen? How are you going to work it out? They tell me. I call my photographer in Jerusalem called Boaz. I say, be sure you're here at 1 o'clock for the riot. I need these pictures, all that kind of stuff. I put on my Kevlar helmet, my bulletproof vest. I go on the other side of the line. What happens is, every Friday, there is this march through the town. They protest, they make noise, they do whatever they got to do. They're unmolested until they go the few hundred yards outside of town and attempt to cut off the road. Then the security guys stop them. And they draw a line in the sand and they say, you can't go there. Now, this is all being done not for them. Because on any other day, they can just hop in their car and drive wherever they want. This is not being done for me. This is being done for you. You are the main consumer of this. I'm going to explain what's going on. The cops are here, security forces, military. The civilians are here, and they train the children to provoke the Israelis by draping their flags over their face mask, by taking fake swings at them. The regular villagers insult their mother, they insult their country, insult their religion, call them names, trying to provoke a response. Now the Israeli guys, they know about this whole thing before they get there, because they're doing this every Friday. So they're trained to act like stones and not respond. But in case they do respond, from some provocation, there's about 10 people dancing around the Israelis with camcorders, like 5 inches from their nose. You couldn't dance around a meter maid in Miami, 5 inches from her nose, or from a traffic cop in Fort Lauderdale, 5 inches from his nose. But the Israelis are too timid to do otherwise and stop these guys. Then finally, when someone reacts, they film it, they put it up on the internet, and now they have the optic moment to try to get the Israelis to look like monsters and to get them indicted on war crimes and do their boycott and everything else. So I'm there, and there's a video of me there, and these guys come up. My photographer Boaz is late, and they say, it's not fair. This guy here, this reporter is here, and you're pretending to not be brutal, and where's the brutality? We need it. In other words, they were robbed of their opportunity to be brutal. So suddenly I get the phone call. My photographer Boaz says, I'm here. He pulls around the corner, nothing is going on, he's suiting up, the people stand up and start chanting for some violence, and they say, we want the skunk, we want the skunk. Anybody in the room know what the skunk is? It's a water cannon with stinky water in it that smells so bad, if it hits you, you can't get off your clothes for 4 weeks. It's used as, so can you imagine Martin Luther King crossing the Selma Bridge and demanding water hoses and German Shepherd dogs? Not in the history of peaceful protest was this ever done. Finally, there was no skunk, there was no violent interaction. Everybody's getting ready to go home, and my photographer Boaz shows up. He's got the gadget vest. He's got the long lens. He's got the motor drive. He's got the double body. He looks like the epitome of a network photographer. The riot begins. The incendiaries, the rocks, the flashbang, back and forth. Now, this is all being conducted in a small town, and the small town is filled with Arabs, Palestinians, and they speak what language? English. Arabic. They speak Arabic, and the soldiers are speaking Hebrew. So the protesters speak Arabic, the soldiers are speaking Hebrew, but the entire riot is conducted in English. And then, as soon as somebody does something, it goes up to the internet, you see that snapshot. Because a picture is equal to 1,000 words, but if you have more than one picture, you have an entire novel, an entire volume. And I look at the label on the camcorder, because this is about getting below the surface, right? This is not just looking at the scab, but seeing what causes it, right? I look at the label, and it's got an organizational name called B'Tselem. And B'Tselem is a human rights organization, a 501c3, getting taxpayer money. Now, how does it work? Every time you give a donation of $1 million to any taxpayer entity, a school, a charitable organization, a religious group, every man, woman, and child in the country ponies up $400,000 to compensate. So it isn't that I'm a rich guy and I gave $1 million to my favorite human rights organization. You had to pay the difference to the tune of 40%. All right, so I got this outfit B'Tselem, and they're all about one thing: giving people who are involved in the riot, who are provoking the riot, the ability to capture and edit a snippet of the riot and put it up on the internet. Okay, so then I go down to my favorite hotel in East Jerusalem called the American Colony. I have a meeting with another NGO, and this NGO is called Adala. So I said, nice guy. They're all nice guys. Everybody I met's a nice guy. Everybody I met is great for a breakfast party. Don't think they're nice. So I said, so what do you do? He says, well, when the Israelis throw rockets into Gaza, we document it all and try to get them prosecuted for war crimes. I said, okay. What do you do when the rockets come in from Gaza against the Israelis? I said, nothing. I said, so when they start shooting the rockets, you don't do nothing, and when they shoot back to suppress the fire, you document that. I said, yes. I said, you're getting a lot of U.S. money. He said, yeah, we're very happy about it. Thank you very much. And I said, but in the U.S., we have a little thing about being fair and balanced. Don't you think you should be equal? He said, well, no one ever brought that up to us. I said, and the name of your entity is called Adala? He said, yes. And I said, it's Arabic? He said, yes. I said, and in Arabic it means justice, which comes from the Egyptian goddess Mat, who was blind to everything but the balance of justice on the scales. So I'm going through, and I'm finding group after group of human rights organizations that are involved in not only documenting human rights, but are actually filtering it. So only one group of people gets the human rights, and they get to editorialize and edit and produce their own version of the human rights. I got a whole list of them. And I'm starting, remember what I said to you before about money, right? This can't be done without money, right? So, you know me, I checked on the money. I checked on all their money for 5 or 10 years. And let's see what I found out. So, okay, I got a list of 800 groups here. Some of these groups are very good groups. They help disadvantaged ethnic groups and battered women. Okay, let's try this. Here is an entity in yellow. What's an entity called?
Adala.
Adala? Mm-hmm. And how much is Adala getting for the year?
357,000 roughly.
357,000 to Adala. And here's another group down there. What's that called?
The Association for Civil Rights in Israel.
and they're another one of the leading protesters. And what they protest is not that a guy moved into a house that wasn't his, but that he was a Jew. That's what this is about. Is the guy a Jew or a Christian or a Muslim moving into that house? So no taxpayer money could ever be used to enforce any kind of effort to keep Jews or blacks or Muslims out of the neighborhood, but it can over there. And how much is this group getting?
A little over $1 million.
What's the exact number?
$1,700,846.
Okay, now then we also talked about that entity called B'Tselem, right? And how much is B'Tselem getting? It's right there.
B'Tselem gets annually $333,828.
Okay, so now, I'm not going to bore you with the full 800, but I am going to ask you to check out the aggregate of what all these groups were getting in 1 year. And could you read that number?
It's 23,100,049.
$23,149. All coming from one organization. And the name of the organization is, read it.
New Israel Fund.
New Israel Fund. Now in the past I've been able to document the conduct of 501c3s like the Carnegie Institution that created the eugenics that placed a scourge upon America. And I've been able to document how the Rockefeller Foundation, I know the word name Flagler is big around here, but he was his buddy. The Rockefeller Foundation, as you know from the lecture I gave a couple of years ago, put the charitable money into Nazi Germany to put Mengele into Auschwitz. So when I look at a philanthropic organization, a charitable group, I take a deep, deep look. And this group here, New Israel Fund, is a Jewish group. It's run by some of the leading Jews in America. Some of them were involved in determining who would and would not say what and do what and sign what in the recent peace project, peace negotiations in Israel. And what does this mean for critical thinkers? The easiest mistake you can make is to believe that just because some guy is a Muslim, he's in with ISIS, and just because some guy is Jewish, he represents Israel, and just because some guy is from Mosul, he represents the Chaldean Christians. We have to think critically. Groups are not monolithic. And in this particular case, we have some well-established, brilliant thinking Jews who are so happy with their situation, they believe there does not need to be an Israel or a Jewish state, and want to mobilize all these resources, as I just said, for that optic moment. And in Israel, where they're fighting this, and 3 parliamentarians are saying this is not just charitable, this is a military front. I quoted them in the book, 3 top parliamentarians. There were many others on the record saying the New Israel Fund is actually creating a military front that the Egyptians could not do with their tanks on Sinai, that the Syrians could not do with their infantry and divisions on the Golan Heights. And so because Israel won militarily, a new battlefield has come up. It's not on the distant frontier, it's around the corner. And this includes groups like Rabbis for Human Rights, who will afflict a guy just because he's Jewish from moving into an apartment, whether he's a good man or a bad man, paid a lot of money or a little money for it. I know many of you believe that this is about a territorial war between Palestinians and Israelis. Guess what? The disputed territory is sometimes closer than my nose to that cameraman. We're talking across the street. We're talking around the hill. In Nabisela, it was down the road. Bill Clinton said he talked to Yasser Arafat and said, we're all ready to make peace. It's down to this 50 feet at the Wailing Wall. He said, can't give it to you. 50 feet? So actually, this is not a territorial war. This is a religious war in a part of the world where religious wars are the only wars. All right, moving on to the parliament, to the critical thinking. So, I don't care about the Super Bowl. Carol can tell you that. I know all you do. I know Drew thinks a lot about it. But the fact of the matter is, I don't care about the Super Bowl. Because I don't care about the Super Bowl, I flew to Israel on Super Bowl day. That's why I got such a cheap flight. There was nobody on the airplane. And however, I heard about someone called Scarlett Johansson doing an ad for SodaStream. And SodaStream makes a seltzer out of ordinary water. And everybody was all at Twitter, no reference to social media, everyone was all at Twitter over the fact that Israel had this Israeli company called SodaStream that was committing an international crime by employing Arabs to make this environmentally cool product. So I went into the European Union, to European Parliament in Brussels, and I was in a room like this, and of the top the top parliamentarians who work on Israel. And I said, SodaStream, this is made by Israelis a mile or two down from the line, and it's got an mosque on site, and half the workers are Muslim, and they're all getting equal money and equal advantage and equal pay and equal working conditions. And this is a war crime, or this is some kind of international breach? They said, yes, it's a violation of international law. So here's your Joshua Kimber moment. Somebody says that there's a violation of international law, you say,
Yes, there is.
you say, which one? Which one? Which one? And so, we reviewed the situation. I said, now let me get this straight. If this idyllic factory where Muslims and Israelis are getting equal pay to work equally under equal conditions and equal advancements, earning 10 times what they could back home, if it were being run by nuns from Poland, or Mormons from Utah, or Mennonites from Indiana, they'd be up for a Nobel Prize. Yes, but it's being run by Jews, so that makes it an international crime. Yes. And now you're beginning to understand a little more about what I'll be talking about at Nova later. The law can be bent, misinterpreted. So then I said to these guys, these were the top experts, and I said, where does international law begin in Israel and the Palestinian Authority? What's the birthplace? What's the rock bottom? What's the fundamental? What's day one of international law? And they said, well, we don't know. Now, everybody in this here room has heard that the settlements are illegal, right? Is there anyone here heard on the news that Israeli settlements are illegal against international law? Raise your hand if you heard that. Okay. Does anybody know why they're against international law? Do you know why? You don't. Do you know why? Okay. Are you both Stanford? Are you both professors?
Yes.
Okay, we'll find out. So, the birthplace of international law in Israel. I said to them, do you guys know what San Remo is? They said, mineral water? Okay, let me explain it to you. Can we zoom out? Way out. Okay, that's it. This is Israel. This is Jerusalem. This is Ashkelon. Beautiful city. 8 miles away is Gaza. What's 8 miles from here? My hotel, the Renaissance and Plantation. Okay, so all these rockets are going 8 miles just across there. This is Egypt. Okay? So, let's pan out more. A little more. Good. This here is Turkey. Turkey had the Ottoman Empire. They owned everything on 3 continents for 500 years that was in the Ottoman Empire. Everyone here heard of the Ottoman Empire? Okay. So they owned Palestine. Okay? Nobody knew where Palestine was because Palestine was actually called Syria Palestina. It was considered part of Syria, attached to it by Rome when it threw the Jews out, when Israel was called Judea, and then they decided to expel the Jews and rename the nation for the greatest enemy of the Jews. And who knows what the word Palestinian means? What does it mean? Philistines. So they renamed it for the Philistines. Okay. So Turkey went to war with Germany in World War I. And as a result of that, England and France saw the opportunity to get all the oil that they wanted in the Middle East, okay, that was owned by the Sultan. So the first thing they did was they invaded Iraq. But as to Palestine, there was something called nationalistic groups. Does anybody know what Zionism is? Can anyone define Zionism? You, let's go to you. What's your name?
Trevor.
What?
Trevor.
Trevor? What's Zionism mean?
I believe it is that the Jews have a right to a homeland.
Jews have a right to a homeland. That's three-quarter right. Let's talk to the professor of Jewish affairs. What is Zionism?
National movement for Jewish state.
91% correct. He added a few words that were added later on in Israel. At the end of the 19th century, everybody know when the 19th century was? When was the 19th century? 1800s. Is he correct? Yes, he is correct. End of the 19th century. There was a rise of nationalism. People were tired of being governed by monastic, ecclesiastical, and dynastic regimes. They wanted to run their own affairs. They had something called self-determination. You all heard about self-determination. You didn't hear about self-determination. All right, self-determination was the rights of a group to identify themselves on religious basis, cultural basis, geographical basis. They live between the 2 mountains. Heritage, whatever it is. They say, we are a people, whether we're Kurds, Hungarians, Armenians, or Jews, and we want our own, to determine our own national affairs, and so we're going to be a nationalistic group, and the Jews were amongst those, and they had Jewish nationalism. That's Zionism, Jewish nationalism. The professor was right, but he wasn't right till 1905. Because in 1905, they decided a little later that they're not going to have a Jewish state just anywhere. I mean, the British offered him Uganda, thinking Kenya was Uganda, and they offered him Egypt. They said, no, we already been to Egypt. So that was Jewish nationalism. And then when did Arab nationalism start? Yes. Then not the day after. The decade after, 1908. You ever heard of the Young Turk movement? The Young Turks established themselves a decade later. Okay. So, after Turkey lost the war, the League of Nations dismantled the Ottoman Empire. And when they dismantled the Ottoman Empire, they took all these territories, they said, you may govern yourselves, as long as we're in charge. And they made mandates through the League of Nations. And now, you all heard the Balfour Declaration. Raise your hand, you heard the Balfour Declaration. That's it? 3 guys heard the Balfour Declaration? You know the Balfour Declaration? Do you know the Balfour Declaration? Do you know the Balfour Declaration? Do you? Okay, the Balfour Declaration was a famous British declaration by the Crown saying, we recognize a Jewish homeland in Palestine with immigration. Okay? And everybody knows that, and they think that's the basis of what was going on with Israel. Actually, there were 3 other declarations that you haven't been told about, that you don't study in school. The Woodrow Wilson Declaration, the French Declaration, the German Declaration, and the Talat Declaration, T-A-L-A-A-T. The Talat Declaration was issued by Turkey before the war was over about its own sovereign property in Palestine that it had governed for half a millennium, and said we also concur with these other ones and we want to make a Jewish homeland there and Arab homeland. So, 10 years they debate this, and they finally put it in the League of Nations, which is adopted by 59 countries after discussing it for 15 years or better, okay? And they have a treaty, international law, the basis of international law. And the basis of international law was the thing that the guys in Europe at the Parliament, at the House of Parliament, thought was mineral water. Let's bring up the Treaty of San Remo. Here's the Treaty of San Remo, which I happen to have here. And in the Treaty of San Remo, I'm going to ask Joshua to read Article 6.
The mandatory shall be responsible for seeing that no Palestinian territory shall be ceded or leased to or in any way placed under the control of the government of any foreign power. Oops, sorry, I read 5.
You read 5. 5 is good too. Let's go with 6.
The administration of Palestine, while ensuring that the rights and position of other sections of the population are not prejudiced, shall facilitate Jewish immigration under suitable conditions and shall encourage, in cooperation with the Jewish agency referred to in Article 4, closed settlement by Jews on the land, including state lands and wastelands not required for public purposes.
Did you say closed settlement by Jews on the land?
Closed settlement by Jews on the land.
Okay. That's the San Remo Treaty, adopted by 59 nations, passed unanimously by these countries in their own legislatures, including ours. And it didn't just disappear after 1920 when it was passed, it was re-adopted. And it was re-adopted in the UN Charter, 1945. Let's hit the UN Charter. Give me UN Charter. Here we go, UN Charter. The reason I'm showing you this is not because I got the mic and you don't. I want you to be able to check stuff out on your own. UN Charter, Article 80. Let's go to Professor Parker here. You got a good voice. All right, read Article 80, right up there.
All right. Except as may be agreed upon in individual trustship agreements made under Articles 77, 79, and 81, placing each territory under the trustship system, and until such agreements have been concluded. Nothing in this chapter shall be construed in or of itself to alter in any manner the rights whatsoever of any states or any peoples, or the terms of existing international instruments to which members of the United Nations may respectfully be parties.
That means that the Treaty of San Remo, which was adopted by 59 nations and enforced for decades after being debated for years, is now still in force. The Jewish and the Arab people, nothing shall be construed in any manner to compromise the rights whatsoever of any states or any peoples. That's 1948. Come 1945, come 1948, the Arabs say we will not create a state. Why? Because we will not coexist with the Jews. It's not about the 50 feet between my nose and this guy with the camera. They said we would rather be colonial subjects of England. Because once you make a fence, then you have to say, this is my fence. Who's on the other side of the fence? So then I asked him, it's Palestinian land, right? He said, yes. So I said, when did it become Palestinian land? What year? What decade? What century? Let's go around. What about you? When did it become Palestinian land?
It's a trick question. Right?
It is a trick question.
No.
Rome? No. All right. When did it become Palestinian land?
I would say never.
Never. Okay. Now here's a Lulu for you in the critical thinking department. The word Palestinian in the first 6 decades of the 20th century, if you go back to the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Florida papers, the Associated Press, if you watch a movie called Exodus by Otto Preminger, you look at all that stuff, the word Palestinian meant a Zionist Jew. Jewish Agency for Palestine, Palestine Post, Palestine Water Company, Palestine Bank, these were all Jews. And the other word for the other people was Arabs. In approximately the Yasser Arafat PLO days, they changed the word Palestinian to mean Arab anti-Zionist. Now you don't have to check that with me. You all have access to ProQuest here at the Broward, right? You have access to the New York Times. Just go into the 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, and get the New York Times Palestinian. You say, these pressuring Palestinians, they're not talking about Arabs, they're talking about Jews. These Palestinian victims, they're talking about Jews. So now we got a factory making soda water bottles under international law that's been in place, adopted by 59 countries, reabsorbed into the UN Charter, and actually was the basis for the Oslo Accords. So now we get to the real issue of whose land is it? In the West Bank and Gaza, we have what we call, write it down, a sovereignty vacuum. Never been sovereignty. There's residence, but never been sovereignty. So we have something called the status quo. Now, have all of you heard about the Temple Mount getting into violence lately? You guys read the newspapers, watch the TV, or is it just Twitter? You know about the Temple Mount violence lately? Who knows about the Temple Mount violence lately? Okay, there's riots on the Temple Mount. And the reason the riots are on the Temple Mount is because the Israelis are not observing the status quo. Do you know what the status quo on the Temple Mount is? The Temple Mount is where Jesus walked, where the Holy of Holies was for Jews, and is the rock from which Muhammad was said to ascend onto the seventh heaven when he flew to a mosque that they called the furthest mosque from Mecca. And what is the Arabic word for the furthest? Al-Aqsa. Al-Aqsa Mosque, the furthest, because of course the word Jerusalem never appears in the Quran, and appears hundreds of times, so they went to the furthest. So this was their way of showing dominion. And so if a Jew in Israel is seen to quiver his lips, they will presume the Jew is praying. We're not talking about opening up a falafel stand. We're talking about silent communication with your Lord. Now, you can be a Muslim, and you can be a Hindu, and you can be a Yazidi, and you can be a Druze, and you can be Barack Obama, and you can be anyone you want to be. And when you go to the Wailing Wall, you can talk to God. No one checks you out. When you go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, you can communicate with your God right there, whether you are a Roman Catholic or whether you are a Protestant or any other dominion, no one checks you out. But apparently the status quo, based on the Pact of Umar, going back to 700, where the word dhimmi came to pass, that says Christians and Jews, the people of the book, may not pray as we pray, must pray quietly, and cannot be equal citizens under our law. This is the status quo that they're talking about. A Jew in Israel quivering his lips, appearing to mumble to God. For that, they're arrested. And they're arrested even by Israeli police, because they believe in the status quo. And this is the status quo that you guys are all paying for. Bearing in mind that every time I make a statement like this, you need to understand that 30,000 people a day, Arabs, are going from the Palestinian authorities into Israel to work in factories, hotels, high-tech sector, bus companies, taxis. They work alongside everybody else. These are the real coexisting people, struggling to earn a living. You know, peace will not be possible in your lifetime. Forget about that. When you see that word peace, that's the time to start running. But peaceful coexistence can take place. We've had peaceful coexistence with Egypt. We've had the treaty has been in place for years, up and down. It's always being thrown away next week, but it never happens. We've had peaceful coexistence with Jordan. So the message here is, we can have not peace, but peaceful coexistence in our generation between Palestinians and Israelis, but not until we begin the critical thinking that allows us to understand what we are really seeing, think further than we're really being told, and not until we can cease financing the flames. Thank you.